Behind the glitz and glamour, Hollywood's legends were hiding some wild secrets in their homes. From mysterious tunnels to haunted rooms, these 23 celebrity estates tell stories that'll blow your mind. Jayne Mansfield's house, famously called the Pink Palace, was absolutely one of a kind. Built in the late 50s in Los Angeles, you couldn't miss it with its bright bubblegum pink paint and outrageous design. Everyone said it perfectly captured Jayne's over-the-top personality, and boy, did it show in every single room. The place had a heart-shaped pool with a mosaic that spelled out, "I love you, Jayne," and the pink obsession didn't stop at carpets. Walls and ceilings were pink in some rooms, too. Her husband, Mickey Hargitay, the former Mr. Universe, added his own touch by installing a fountain that Jayne would sometimes fill with pink champagne for her famous parties. The Pink Palace at 10,100 Sunset Boulevard started as a pretty ordinary Mediterranean-style home before Mansfield bought it in 1957. She immediately went wild with changes that shocked neighbors and thrilled the press, dropping over $76,000, that's about like $800,000 today, to create her pink fantasy. Behind all that craziness was a woman with surprising talents. Mansfield spoke 5 languages fluently and played violin beautifully, often practicing in a small music room she kept despite the house's otherwise outrageous style. Here's the sad part. While creating this shrine to femininity and romance, her marriage to Hargitay was already falling apart. She put pink phones in every room, including bathrooms, partly because she was scared of missing important calls from her often absent husband. Most touching was the pink nursery she created for her kids, where she'd spend hours reading to them in different languages, determined they'd get the education she'd fought so hard for herself. When money got tight in the 60s, Mansfield refused to downsize, instead turning part of the house into a makeshift photography studio, where she charged the press for pictures, transforming her private space into income while keeping up her lavish image. While it definitely grabbed attention, the house also showed Jayne's deep need to stand out in a Hollywood scene that constantly compared her to Marilyn Monroe. She never settled for blending in, and her Pink Palace made that crystal clear. Sadly, they tore the place down in the early 2000s. Even so, people still remember its wild, outrageous style. It remains a vivid reminder of a woman who embraced every chance to be different, right until the very end. Clark Gable, often called the King of Hollywood, found peace away from studio lights at a secluded ranch in Encino, part of the San Fernando Valley. While he was famous for sweeping romantic roles like Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, Gable's private life had a much quieter, down-to-earth feel. His ranch, hidden among farmland and rolling hills, gave him room to enjoy a simpler lifestyle, far from photographers. Built in the 30s, the property didn't show off like some other star homes, but it had plenty of hidden appeal. Wide fields and well-kept stables reflected Gable's love for the outdoors. He often rode horses on the trails and entertained close friends with casual barbecues instead of the fancy parties typical of Hollywood's elite. Gable bought the 20-acre Encino Ranch in 1939 with his third wife, actress Carole Lombard, as their dream home. Behind the property's rustic look was a man trying to balance humble beginnings with unexpected fame. Born to a struggling oil worker in Ohio, Gable had worked at a tire factory and as a lumberjack before finding acting. Despite his smooth screen image, the ranch showed his true preferences: practical furniture, hunting trophies, and farm equipment he fixed himself. The home held deep emotional meaning after Lombard's tragic 1942 plane crash death. While returning from a war bond tour, Gable enlisted in the Army Air Forces at 41, serving as a gunner on dangerous German bombing missions, seemingly seeking risky assignments in his grief. When he returned, He couldn't bear changing anything in her closets or dressing room, preserving them exactly as she left them for the rest of his life. His library revealed a little-known intellectual side. Gable loved reading history and poetry, especially Civil War accounts and Robert Service's works. Perhaps most telling was his workshop, where he spent hours making handmade furniture, a therapeutic hobby that helped him cope with personal losses. After his death, staff discovered he'd kept detailed scrapbooks documenting the care of every plant and animal on the property, showing a tenderness that contrasted with his rugged public image. A small cottage on the grounds served as his personal hideaway, where Gable would practice lines or just relax with a good book. Following personal tragedies, especially wife Hedy Lamarr's death, this ranch became Gable's grief sanctuary. Locals remembered seeing him walking the property at sunset, finding comfort in its peace. Though time and development have changed Encino, the legend of Clark Gable's hidden ranch lives on, reminding fans that even Hollywood royalty sometimes needed a quiet escape. Mae West. Mae West took a different path than most Hollywood stars. She chose a classy apartment in the historic Ravenswood building instead of some sprawling mansion. But don't let apartment fool you. Inside, it was pure Mae West magic, decorated almost entirely in white, from the plush carpets to those shiny mirrored walls. The showstopper had to be her seashell-shaped bed. Talk about making a statement. She kept movie souvenirs everywhere, flashy costumes, props, photographs tracking her rise to fame. You name it, she probably had it. Unlike other stars who constantly upgraded to bigger digs, Mae moved into the Ravenswood in 1932 and stayed put for 48 years until she died in 1980. Pretty remarkable in flighty Hollywood. Her apartment doubled as her office, where she wrote her famously risque plays that sometimes got raided by cops for being too naughty. What most people didn't know was that behind all that bold, sexy confidence, Mae was actually pretty private and superstitious. She had psychics on speed dial and regularly had her place blessed by spiritual advisors. She even kept a separate, simple bedroom from that famous seashell bed. Her real sleeping space was plain as day, totally different from her public image. Despite making millions, Mae stashed cash all over her apartment. She didn't trust banks after watching so many people lose everything in the 1929 crash. While other stars moved to bigger and bigger mansions, Mae stayed loyal to her Ravenswood apartment for decades, watching Hollywood change around her. Over the years, people have whispered about ghosts and strange happenings, with some folks claiming they can still feel her presence in those halls. True or not, her longtime apartment stands as a testament to Mae West's fierce independence. She lived life on her own terms, never following trends or trying to fit in. Even today, her name brings up images of quick wit, sharp comebacks, and a woman who refused to fade into the background. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn's Mulholland farm was like a grown-up playground for Hollywood's most famous swashbuckler, the guy from Captain Blood and the Adventures of Robin Hood. Perched up in the Hollywood Hills and built in the 40s, this place had it all: main house, guest house, and a sparkling pool surrounded by gorgeous landscaping. Flynn, famous for his on-screen sword fights and off-screen wild ways, added some pretty unconventional touches. We're talking secret passages to hidden bedrooms and a two-way mirror that let him spy on guests without them knowing. He even had his own pistol range for target practice and a private bar for those legendary parties. But here's where it gets dark. Those peeping Tom features showed a side of Flynn his fans never saw. His friendship with a Nazi sympathizer named Hermann Urban actually got the FBI watching his place during World War II, though they never charged Flynn with anything. The estate hid evidence of Flynn's serious drinking problem and failing health. He had a vitamin room that was really just packed with medications for everything from malaria to his bad heart. Surprisingly, Flynn sometimes showed real kindness at Mulholland Farm, opening his doors to war refugees and letting struggling actors crash in his guest house. After he died, a gospel singer named Stuart Hamblin bought the place and found some disturbing stuff hidden in secret compartments, including what looked like homemade porn films Flynn made right there. This wild home perfectly captured Flynn's adventurous spirit and his darker demons. As his career tanked in the 50s and his health and money ran out, Mulholland Farm fell apart, just like Flynn himself. Eventually, they tore the whole place down. But the legend lives on. Old movie buffs still talk about those mysterious tunnels and wild parties, seeing it all as pure Errol Flynn, bigger than life until the very end. Alla Nazimova. Alla Nazimova's Garden of Alla was a colorful haven on Sunset Boulevard that offered refuge for Hollywood's rebels and free spirits. A Russian-born actress and producer, Nazimova bought the mansion in the 1910s and transformed it into an open-minded retreat. She built guest villas and designed an eye-catching pool shaped like the Black Sea. Artists, writers, and actors like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Greta Garbo, and Errol Flynn found peace there, drawn by the relaxed vibe and Nazimova's progressive attitude. Word had it she hosted private gatherings that challenged conservative 1920s standards, giving guests a place to break free from Hollywood's usual restrictions. Few Garden of Alla visitors realized the property represented Nazimova's incredible personal transformation. Born Marion Edez Adelaida Leventin in Yalta, Crimea, she fled a brutally abusive childhood by running away to Moscow at 17. Her journey from broke immigrant to property owner symbolized the hard-won independence she fiercely protected. Though the complex eventually included 25 villas around her mansion, Nazimova kept a private apartment above the garage that she rarely invited anyone to see. A personal sanctuary decorated with Orthodox icons and family photos that revealed her sentimental attachment to the Russian homeland she publicly claimed to reject. The Garden of Alla served as more than a bohemian hangout. It functioned as an unofficial safe house for LGBTQ actors and artists during an era of persecution. Nazimova herself had relationships with women, but carefully hid this from studio executives. She planted a special garden of night-blooming flowers, specifically for guests who could only visit after dark due to scandal concerns, ensuring they could enjoy natural beauty regardless of when they felt safe to appear. Despite her flamboyant public image, financial records found after her death showed she'd quietly paid college tuition for dozens of young women, mostly daughters of immigrants, with the only requirement being that her sponsorship stay anonymous during her lifetime. But money troubles forced Nazimova to sell in the 20s. Eventually, it became a hotel that had its ups and downs, before being demolished in the 50s to make room for a strip mall. To most folks passing by today, there's hardly any sign that this spot once buzzed with creativity and free thinking. Yet the Garden of Alla's memory endures as proof that Hollywood wasn't all about blockbusters and glamour. Sometimes it was a safe haven for those brave enough to be different, if only temporarily. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr's Hollywood house was a perfect mix of glamour and genius, just like the lady herself. Built high in the hills during the 40s, it featured clean, modern lines, with huge windows flooding every room with natural light. To most visitors, it looked like any stylish movie star home. But here's what made it special. Hedy wasn't just a gorgeous face. She was a brilliant inventor. Hidden from Hollywood's prying eyes, she kept a private workshop where she tinkered with ideas, including groundbreaking frequency-hopping technology that later became the foundation for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. That secret workshop told the real story of Hedy's amazing double life. Born Hedwig Kiesler in Austria to Jewish parents, she fled a terrible marriage to a Nazi arms dealer, escaping with just her jewelry sewn into her clothes. This traumatic experience made her crave security, leading her to create a home that looked normal outside but housed revolutionary ideas inside. Her dining room actually doubled as an engineering lab where she worked with composer George Antheil to develop their frequency-hopping patent, designed to help Allied torpedoes avoid detection during World War II. While studio executives dismissed her brainy side, Howard Hughes got it. He set her up with a small lab and equipment right in her home, calling her a perfect combination of good looks and brains. Despite Hollywood ignoring her inventive mind during her lifetime, Hedy kept at it for personal satisfaction, telling her son, "Films paid the bills, but inventing brought me joy." In a town obsessed with red carpets and premieres, Hedy quietly pursued her intellectual passions. She rarely let anyone into her workshop, and most people had no clue about her high-level problem-solving skills. That mysterious blend of beauty and brains turned her into something of a Hollywood legend. Though the house is gone now, Hedy's story still amazes fans who marvel at how she balanced stardom and science when nobody thought a leading lady could be a serious inventor. Her legacy proves that creativity knows no boundaries, even in an industry built entirely on appearances. Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes's Beverly Hills estate was like a maze reflecting the brilliant but troubled mind of its owner. Bought in the 20s, it sat behind massive walls and thick trees, offering complete privacy to a man who became increasingly reclusive over the years. Inside, sleek luxury met cutting-edge technology. Hughes was always pushing boundaries in aviation and his personal life. He even built his own airstrip on the property so he could come and go without dealing with the outside world. The place perfectly reflected Hughes's growing paranoia and OCD, which few people outside his inner circle really understood. Long before these conditions were properly recognized, Hughes created what we'd now call a clean room environment in parts of his home, with elaborate air filtration systems and strict rules for anyone entering certain areas. His bedroom had a custom-built bed with mechanical adjustments way ahead of its time. To help with chronic pain from several plane crash injuries, he kept secret from the public. Despite his isolation, Hughes maintained political connections through special phone lines that gave him direct access to U.S. presidents and government officials. His estate hid evidence of his weird work habits. He'd stay awake for days in his projection room, reviewing films frame by frame, while living on nothing but chicken soup and chocolate bars. Behind those imposing gates, Hughes occasionally showed surprising kindness, secretly funding medical treatments for down-on-their-luck employees and actors, though he rarely let them thank him face-to-face. As his fears and quirks intensified, Hughes added hidden rooms and secret passages, making sure he could always find privacy. He became obsessed with every tiny detail, from furniture placement to keeping each room at the perfect temperature. When his mental health crashed in the 40s and 50s, the estate felt more like a self-imposed prison than a luxurious retreat. After he died in the 70s, they sold the place and eventually tore it down, ending its strange hold on the neighborhood. But stories about Hughes's life of genius, paranoia, and secrecy still fascinate people, reminding us that brilliance often comes with a heavy price tag, and isolation can be both a refuge and a cage. Dolores Del Rio. Dolores Del Rio's Los Angeles home showcased her fierce pride in Mexican heritage and her willingness to embrace new ideas. Built in the 20s by visionary architect Richard Neutra, this sleek structure stood out dramatically against the fancy, ornate mansions other Hollywood stars preferred. Big windows and open floor plans gave it a clean, minimalist vibe that perfectly matched Dolores's vision of modern luxury. Inside, she surrounded herself with art and treasures from Mexico, creating a personal sanctuary that celebrated her roots. This attracted other creative types too. Painters, writers, and fellow stars like Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo often stopped by, finding it refreshingly different from typical Hollywood style. Dolores's choice of modernist Nutra as her architect was a bold statement in an industry that expected its Latin American stars to live in stereotypical Spanish-style homes. Born into an aristocratic Mexican family that lost everything in the Mexican Revolution, Del Rio carried painful memories of loss that drove her desire to create an authentic cultural space within Hollywood's fake world. Her home became an unofficial cultural embassy where she hosted fundraisers for Spanish Civil War orphans and Mexican earthquake victims. Despite her glamorous image, Dolores faced serious racism in Hollywood. Studios tried marketing her as Spanish instead of Mexican, thinking American audiences wouldn't accept a Mexican star. Her home became her refuge from discrimination, with one room dedicated to letters from Mexican children who saw her as their ambassador to America. During the Depression's anti-Mexican sentiment, Dolores used her home to meet with civil rights leaders fighting the illegal deportation of Mexican Americans, many of whom were actually U.S. citizens. When her American career slowed in the 40s, Dolores chose to return to Mexico, where she continued acting and became a major influence in her homeland's film industry. Over time, the house changed hands, and various modifications left it looking nothing like Nutra's original design. Still, architecture fans recognize its groundbreaking role in bringing modernism to Southern California. To many, Dolores Del Rio's former home stands as powerful proof that an artist can blend cultural heritage with cutting-edge design, leaving a lasting mark beyond just the movies. James Dean. James Dean's final home, a tiny bungalow in Sherman Oaks, told a completely different story from the fast-paced life he lived on screen. In the mid-50s, he settled into this ordinary rental, apparently preferring a quiet spot far from Hollywood's glitzy party scene. But the place still revealed glimpses of Dean's restless energy and deep passions. He famously parked his Porsche 550 Spyder in the garage, the same sports car that would later become tragically famous in his fatal accident. Inside, Dean showed a more thoughtful side, spending hours sketching, reading scripts, or fooling around with bongos. Showing his artistic curiosity went way beyond acting. The modest bungalow at 14,611 Sutton Street hardly reflected Dean's skyrocketing fame. Described as a rustic, log cabin-style villa, it wasn't so much Dean's choice of simplicity, but his temporary state. He'd planned to build a proper ranch in the valley once he got really established. The home showed evidence of his unknown talents. Dean was a skilled photographer who turned a small closet into a darkroom where he developed artistic photos that revealed a sensitive side completely at odds with his rebel image. His landlord, Nico Romanos, later revealed that Dean often had insomnia and would spend nights rearranging furniture or reading philosophy, especially Goethe and Schopenhauer, that he kept by his bed. Despite his loner reputation, Dean was surprisingly domestic in his Sherman Oaks home, teaching himself Italian cooking and hosting small dinner parties for close friends like Sal Mineo and Natalie Wood. The night before his fatal Salinas drive, Dean spent his last evening at home planting flowers in the garden, a touching detail that totally contradicts his fast-living image. Close friends remembered him escaping here to get away from studio pressure, wanting a place where he could just be himself without performing for anyone. After his shocking death in 1955, the bungalow stayed mostly unchanged, like a frozen moment from that brief, brilliant time in his life. Though modern renovations have come through, fans still drive by out of curiosity, trying to picture Dean offstage, just a young man dealing with ambition and uncertainty. In many ways, the bungalow's simplicity highlights the huge difference between the mythic James Dean and the real person who once lived there, looking for some peace in a world he left way too soon. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin lived in a Beverly Hills place that perfectly matched his personality. Modest, yet whimsical, just like those classic films City Lights and Modern Times we all loved. Built in the 20s, this cozy little spot wasn't anything fancy, but get this. It had a secret tunnel leading straight to a wine cellar. Chaplin used this hidden passage to slip away from pesky reporters or throw intimate parties away from nosy neighbors. The property had this adorable miniature stage out back where he'd practice his comedy routines before filming. Even though he was one of the world's biggest stars, Charlie kept all the original 1920s decorations inside, like he never forgot where he came from. This humble house became his safe haven during those scary McCarthy years. You know, when Hollywood was hunting communists everywhere. Things got so bad, poor Charlie had to leave America altogether. His playful side really showed in the garden, where he put up fun sculptures and fountains that were pure Chaplin magic. Behind all that charm, though, Charlie carried some heavy baggage from his childhood. Growing up dirt poor in London, spending time in workhouses, watching his mother struggle with mental illness, it all shaped his need for perfect, controlled spaces. Despite his wealth, he stayed surprisingly tight with money, a habit from those hungry childhood days. His neighbors included big shots like David O. Selznick and Fred Astaire, and he got along great with them, way better than with those studio bosses who kept getting on his nerves. These days, the house is privately owned and closed to visitors, but it still holds a special place in Hollywood history. It's a quiet reminder that even world-famous stars need a place to kick back and just be themselves. Buster Keaton's Beverly Hills estate felt like a living museum of silent films. Built in the 20s, this mansion had 20 rooms packed with surprises. A Roman-style pool, a trout stream, even an aviary. Keaton, famous for his inventive comedy, added his personal touches, like a hidden bar that could magically transform into a private screening room. Back then, the house showed just how successful he was during silent film's golden era. But this grand place also hinted at tougher times ahead. Money problems and a bitter divorce forced Keaton to lose this beloved property, mirroring the broader struggles he faced when talkies took over and his career started sliding. Alcohol issues only made things worse, and the estate became a painful reminder of how quickly Hollywood's loyalty could vanish. Even a brilliant performer like Keaton couldn't hold on to everything when the industry shifted. Keaton's Italian villa at 1018 Pamela Drive told both the story of artistic genius and personal tragedy. Known as the Great Stone Face for his deadpan expression on screen, Keaton actually cried openly when forced to sell after just 10 months of ownership. His financial disaster came not from his own overspending, but from a terrible business decision, giving up his independent production company to sign with MGM, where they completely controlled his work. The home's saddest feature was a specially designed playroom for his 2 young sons, whom he lost in his divorce. He kept this room exactly the same, even after the boys stopped visiting. British actor James Mason bought the property in 1952 and found something amazing in the garage, a forgotten vault containing many of Keaton's lost films, which Mason carefully preserved, basically saving a huge chunk of cinema history. Despite his reputation for death-defying stunts, Keaton suffered from severe arthritis that hardly anyone knew about. His Italian villa had a special therapeutic bath where he'd soak his painful joints every morning before going to work, hiding his physical agony from everyone. Today, his old home is long gone, but its story still resonates with fans and film historians. It's a bittersweet chapter in Keaton's life, showing both his creative peaks and the personal and professional battles he faced behind the scenes. Marion Davies. Marion Davies' ocean house in Santa Monica was more than just a mansion. It practically felt like a royal palace by the ocean. Finished in the 20s with financial backing from her powerful partner, William Randolph Hearst, this massive property had over 100 rooms, 55 bathrooms, and 37 fireplaces. The crown jewel was a 110-foot pool, surrounded by marble statues and lush gardens. Davies, who went from silent film star to glamorous socialite, threw parties people still talk about today, hosting legends like Winston Churchill and Charlie Chaplin. But behind all those glitzy events was a quieter reality. Marion's home wasn't just about her success. It was also a symbol of how much she depended on Hearst. He was a domineering figure who sometimes overshadowed her personal dreams. The beachfront estate, officially known as Ocean House, but often called the Beach House, physically represented Davies's complicated relationship with Hearst. Though often painted as just his mistress, Davies was actually a sharp businesswoman who personally oversaw much of the massive construction, showing surprising talent for architectural planning. Despite her party girl image, Davies turned several mansion rooms into a temporary hospital during the 1933 Long Beach earthquake, personally caring for victims. Few guests knew that the mansion included a special room with enhanced acoustics to help Davies practice overcoming her stutter, a speech problem she worked hard to hide from everyone. During Prohibition, the home's huge wine cellar stayed fully stocked through Hearst's connections. But interestingly, Davies herself barely drank, staying sharp to protect her business interests, even during the wildest parties. Perhaps most touching was Davies's generosity. She set up a children's clinic on the property where poor Santa Monica kids got free medical care, a charity she never publicized, despite spending millions of her own money to run it. When Hearst hit financial troubles in the 30s, they had to break up the grand estate, and they demolished the main house in the 50s. Though most of it was lost, the guest house and pool still exist today as part of the Annenberg Community Beach House. In a way, these remaining pieces represent the dreams Davies chased and the price she paid to stay in Hollywood's inner circle. Even though the main mansion is gone, you can still feel her ambition echoing right by the sea. Rudolph Valentino. Rudolph Valentino's Falcon Lair was far more than a simple home. It felt like a mysterious fortress filled with secrets. Built in the 20s in Beverly Crest, it reflected his Italian heritage, complete with sweeping gardens, arched doorways, and a grand staircase that transported you to medieval Europe. Named after his movie, The Hooded Falcon, the estate became intertwined with Valentino's private tragedies. He invested both money and passion into Falcon Lair, but barely got to enjoy it. Just months after moving in, Valentino died suddenly at 31, leaving fans devastated. Heartbroken admirers visited the estate for years, leaving flowers at the gates. Rumors spread that Valentino himself believed the home was cursed, gossip that only intensified after his unexpected death. Falcon Lair at 1436 Bella Drive carried deep sadness that mirrored Valentino's struggles with his own identity. As Hollywood's first male sex symbol, he bought the estate partly to shut down rumors about his sexuality, creating an overly masculine space with weapon collections and a state-of-the-art gym. Born Rodolfo Alfonso Raffaello, Pier Filibert Guglielmi di Valentina d'Antonguella in Italy, he simplified his name, but felt trapped by the exotic Latin lover image studios forced on him. The home's massive library proved his intellectual side, volumes of poetry and philosophy in 4 languages that contradicted his screen image as just another pretty face. Valentino's most private space was a small meditation room, filled with religious artifacts where he escaped the crushing pressure of fame. His final project at Falcon Lair was planting a garden of rare Italian herbs and vegetables, hoping to recreate childhood flavors from Puglia. After his sudden death from peritonitis, his pets, especially his beloved Doberman Cub Bar, supposedly howled through the house for weeks. When they briefly opened Falcon Lair to the public in the 30s, officials found hundreds of letters addressed simply to Valentino, Hollywood, many from women claiming spiritual contact with him. Over time, Falcon Lair changed hands multiple times, and each new owner reported strange occurrences, eerie sounds, and ghostly figures. In the early 2000s, they finally demolished the estate, ending its physical existence. Still, its story lives on as a haunting tribute to Hollywood's first major heartthrob, a reminder that fame can dazzle one moment and vanish cruelly the next, haunting those who chase it with both dreams and fears. Mary Pickford's mansion, known as Pickfair, felt like its own little kingdom in Beverly Hills. Built in the 20s, it showcased the incredible power she wielded as one of Hollywood's earliest superstars. She shared this 42-room palace with Douglas Fairbanks, turning it into the go-to spot for Hollywood's elite, including Albert Einstein, Charlie Chaplin, and Amelia Earhart. While it became the center of glitz and glamour, Pickfair also hid a darker story about Mary's personal struggles. After she and Fairbanks divorced in the 30s, Mary basically disappeared from public life, rarely leaving her luxury sanctuary. Stories say she spent her final years wandering through its lavish rooms, haunted by memories of past fame and her lost love. Behind Pickfair's glamorous exterior lay Pickford's traumatic childhood that shaped everything about her. Born Gladys Smith in Toronto, she became her family's breadwinner at 8 after her father died, creating a lifelong fear of poverty that showed up in strange ways throughout Pickfair. Despite massive wealth, she installed multiple safes everywhere and personally tracked every household expense in detailed ledgers she kept locked away. The estate had a special projection room where Pickford would obsessively watch her old, silent films late at night, especially after drinking, a habit that got worse after her divorce from Fairbanks. Contrary to her America's sweetheart image, Pickford was a sharp businesswoman who ran United Artists meetings in a wood-paneled study at Pickfair, becoming one of Hollywood's most powerful executives when women were expected to be just pretty faces. Her deepest secret was a small nursery she kept at Pickfair, decorated for children she never had. Pickford's biggest regret was choosing career over motherhood, a decision that seemed to haunt her more each year. Most heartbreakingly, she kept all of Fairbanks's belongings exactly as he left them for decades after their divorce, creating a shrine in his former dressing room that stayed untouched until her death. Sadly, in the 90s, Pia Zadora, who owned the mansion, had it demolished, claiming things like termite damage and possible hauntings. That demolition really upset film history buffs, who saw it as destroying a precious piece of Hollywood heritage. Though the building's gone, the name Pickfair still brings up images of movie stars in their prime. In many ways, it represents both the shining moments and hidden heartaches that often lurk behind Hollywood's golden facade. Douglas Fairbanks. Douglas Fairbanks, Hollywood's daredevil, known for movies like The Thief of Baghdad and Robin Hood, lived just as grandly off-screen. While he shared Pickfair with Mary Pickford, he also owned another estate in Santa Monica called Fairbanks Ranch. This lush hideaway had manicured gardens, a private lake, and a charming boathouse. Being a total sports nut, Fairbanks built a modern gym and tennis court where he hosted matches that drew Hollywood's biggest stars. The Santa Monica property reflected Fairbanks' endless quest for physical perfection and staying young. Born Douglas Elton Thomas Ullman, he switched to his mother's maiden name to distance himself from his alcoholic father, a painful childhood that drove his fitness obsession. His Santa Monica place had one of Hollywood's first private gyms, filled with exercise equipment he designed himself, some of which influenced modern fitness machines. While everyone admired his athletic skills, few knew about his private struggle with high blood pressure that started in his 30s. His intense daily workouts were partly attempts to control his condition without medication. The estate's weirdest feature was a custom obstacle course mimicking stunts from his films, which he'd run through every day, regardless of weather or filming schedule. Despite his sophisticated image, Fairbanks had dropped out of school at 12. His Santa Monica home had an extensive library, where he spent hours educating himself. especially about world history and architecture, subjects that later influenced his films. One of the most memorable parts of Fairbanks Ranch was a hidden tunnel connecting the main house to the boathouse. Rumor had it he'd use it to avoid reporters or make dramatic entrances for guests. As his marriage to Pickford fell apart, he increasingly escaped to this Santa Monica sanctuary, eventually installing a shortwave radio system that let him communicate with explorers and adventurers worldwide, living through their journeys when his own age started limiting his adventures. The property's saddest feature was a private screening room where Fairbanks would study his earlier films, growing upset as he watched his younger self perform stunts he could no longer do. His staff revealed that he kept a detailed journal in a hidden safe, documenting his battle with depression and fear of aging in a youth-obsessed industry. Despite his playboy reputation after divorcing Pickford, Fairbanks often spent evenings alone at the ranch writing poetry, a creative outlet he kept secret to protect his masculine image. The tunnel between main house and boathouse served practical purposes beyond dramatic entrances. It let him escape to his yacht when dark moods hit, sometimes disappearing for days on impromptu solo sailing trips. When his marriage ended and his movie popularity dropped, Fairbanks found refuge here, spending more time away from the spotlight. Eventually, they sold and subdivided the property, but the legend lived on. The hidden tunnel and private lake perfectly capture the mix of showmanship and privacy that defined Fairbanks's later years. Even now, memories of his carefree spirit and athletic lifestyle persist, reminding us of a time when Hollywood stars could create personal paradises far from prying eyes. John Barrymore's Bella Vista estate perfectly captured the dramatic flair of the great profile himself. Built in the 1920s in Beverly Hills, this sprawling place had a massive library crammed with rare books and manuscripts, some hidden in secret wall compartments for extra mystery. Barrymore, who lived for classical theater, set up his own private stage where he'd rehearse Shakespeare or entertain a lucky few friends. The whole place had this Gothic vibe with dark wood panels and dramatic lighting. Definitely not your average movie star pad. Behind all that grandeur, Bella Vista showed John's desperate attempts to find some stability in his chaotic life. Born into a famous acting family but cursed with the family drinking problem, Barrymore often disappeared into his library for days at a time. His book collection, worth over $2 million in today's money, revealed his secret identity as a serious intellectual. Though everyone knew him as a legendary actor, John was also a talented artist who turned part of Bella Vista into a studio for his sensitive pen and ink drawings. His most prized possessions weren't acting awards, but rare Japanese prints and first edition Shakespeare, which he'd read aloud to his pet vulture named Maloney, who had the run of the place. When young Errol Flynn first hit Hollywood, Barrymore became his mentor, regularly inviting him over for acting lessons and late-night philosophical chats that deeply influenced Flynn's career. Animals wandered everywhere. John famously kept a monkey and a parrot as permanent house guests. But as his health failed and money troubles piled up in the 30s, Bella Vista became a symbol of his decline. He was forced to sell, which crushed this once mighty star. After changing hands, they eventually tore the place down, erasing a unique piece of Barrymore's complicated legacy. Still, stories about hidden bookcases and impromptu Shakespeare performances keep fascinating old Hollywood fans, reminding them of John's brilliant yet troubled final years. William Randolph Hearst Hearst's San Simeon estate, often called Hearst Castle, was absolutely monumental. Built from the 1910s onward, it sprawled across California's Central Coast hills and ended up with 165 rooms, massive gardens, and 2 enormous swimming pools, one famously decorated with real gold tiles. Hearst, a powerful media baron, spared no expense, shipping in authentic European ceilings, tapestries, and sculptures to fill his enormous retreat. A private zoo even roamed the grounds, complete with zebras and exotic creatures. Behind all the extravagance at San Simeon was Hearst's complex personality. The castle partly came from a childhood memory. At 10, his mother took him on an 18-month tour of European castles and palaces, an experience that left a lasting impression. Beyond simple luxury, San Simeon served as a museum for Hearst's compulsive collecting, which started as a kid and grew so extreme that huge warehouses in New York and California were stuffed with artworks he bought but never displayed. The castle had numerous secret passages and hidden rooms Hearst used to move around without guests seeing him, letting him observe conversations or disappear when social anxiety, something he struggled with despite his public image, became overwhelming. Though known for ruthless business tactics, Hearst surprised people with his tenderness toward animals, establishing one of America's largest private wildlife preserves around San Simeon and personally naming many zoo creatures. Perhaps most surprising, despite owning America's most luxurious home, Hearst often slept in a small, sparsely furnished bedroom staff called the Monk's Cell, quite a contrast to fancy guest rooms. The estate's huge library proved Hearst's intellectual depth. He read extensively in several languages and collected rare manuscripts, including medieval texts scholars could study, despite their not being publicly displayed. Hearst threw lavish parties for Hollywood stars like Charlie Chaplin and Clark Gable. But behind the glitz was a man who loved calling the shots. His longtime companion, actress Marion Davies, often had to juggle his extravagant tastes with her own dreams. Financial problems in the 30s forced Hearst to sell off much of his priceless art, but he managed to keep the estate. Today, it operates as a state historical monument where visitors can still experience the grandeur and excess Hearst treasured. In many ways, San Simeon represents one man's desire for both power and beauty. Yet it also demonstrates the risks of living big, as even the mightiest fortunes can face hard times when situations change. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow's Beverly Hills house looked elegant enough but carried some seriously creepy stories. It was more modest than other star homes, yet it became notorious after her husband Paul Byrne's sudden death. The circumstances around his passing sparked endless debates, stirring up rumors and attracting gawkers. Tragically, Harlow herself died at just 26, adding to the belief that something spooky might be connected to the property. Over time, new owners claimed they heard strange sounds and felt unsettling vibes, building the house's haunted reputation. The Benedict Canyon home at 9820 Easton Drive held secrets way beyond ghost stories. Harlow bought it in 1932 when she was Hollywood's reigning sex symbol, yet behind closed doors, she lived surprisingly differently. Despite her platinum blonde bombshell image, Harlow spent many evenings quietly reading. Her personal library contained hundreds of books on philosophy and science, revealing an intellectual depth MGM deliberately hid. The house showed touching evidence of her close relationship with her mother, who lived with her and controlled much of her career and finances, a relationship that grew strained as Harlow matured. Perhaps most poignant was the nursery Harlow had secretly prepared, hoping to start a family. A dream ended by her early death from kidney failure. Her medical condition partly stemmed from childhood scarlet fever, but was made worse by the toxic platinum hair treatments she endured weekly to maintain her signature look, basically sacrificing her health for her career. In a heartbreaking discovery after her death, Harlow had kept a private journal, documenting her struggles with chronic pain and fatigue, writing in one entry, "I smile on camera because that's my job, but some days it takes everything I have." Though publicly linked to numerous men, her home proved her genuine love for William Powell, who never lived with her, but kept a dedicated room filled with books they shared and notes they wrote each other. Still, Jean's gentler personal side showed up throughout the rooms. She loved surrounding herself with books and keepsakes that hinted at private interests, things the wider world never noticed beyond her screen persona. Even though Harlow's life ended way too soon, the house still stands, quietly reminding passersby of a star who once burned bright. Fans keep wondering if the place is truly cursed or just a backdrop for tragic events. Either way, it's become part of Hollywood's golden age legend, symbolizing both the glamour and heartbreak that could come from living under fame's intense spotlight. Harold Lloyd's mansion, famously called Green Acres, was a brilliant example of both fun and ambition in 1920s Hollywood. Boasting 44 rooms, the property included a 50-foot-long living room, multiple fountains, and perfectly manicured gardens. Lloyd, famous for his dangerous stunts and silent comedies, brought the same creativity to his home, designing a private zoo, a 9-hole golf course, and even a secret room for storing his film collections. Green Acres wasn't just showing off. It was also Lloyd's nod to his relentless quest for excellence. He made sure every corner reflected his passion for perfection, guaranteeing the estate would make a lasting impression. What most Green Acres visitors never knew was that Lloyd had lost his right thumb and index finger in a 1919 promotional photo accident when a prop bomb exploded unexpectedly. The mansion held evidence of his remarkable adaptation to this disability. He designed custom tools and everyday objects throughout the house, modified for his damaged hand. More impressive, he performed his famous death-defying stunts in films like Safety Last, while wearing a special prosthetic glove he developed himself. Despite this life-changing injury, Lloyd kept it secret from the public, worried it would hurt his image as a fearless performer. The estate revealed Lloyd's unknown passion for 3D photography. He converted one wing into an early multimedia studio, where he produced over 300,000 stereoscopic photographs, many featuring Hollywood celebrities in intimate, candid moments. Unlike many stars who fled Hollywood as fame faded, Lloyd stayed at Green Acres for nearly 5 decades. His daughter later shared that he often invited struggling former silent film colleagues to stay in his guest houses, providing housing and financial support without publicity. Perhaps most touching was Lloyd's custom theater room, which included special seating for local orphanage children, whom he invited for regular film screenings, a charitable tradition he maintained for decades without public recognition. But as silent films gave way to talkies, Lloyd struggled to maintain the huge property. By the 70s, much of the estate had been sold off to cover costs. Though the main house still stands, now a historic landmark, the remaining piece of Green Acres captures a special moment in movie history. It's a glimpse into a time when daring screen heroes could design equally daring homes, yet also a reminder that fortunes can turn quickly. Lloyd's estate ultimately reflects his career, grand, inventive, and filled with both victories and setbacks along the way. Gloria Swanson's Beverly Hills mansion, nicknamed Casa del Sol, was as over-the-top as Gloria herself. Built in the roaring 20s with that eye-catching Spanish Moorish style, it had fancy arched doorways, gorgeous tile work, and would you believe it, her own private chapel. Gloria, one of Hollywood's very first megastars, filled every room with exotic treasures from around the globe, Egyptian artifacts, rare antiques, the works. But here's the juicy part. Behind all that glamour was a hidden passageway leading to a secret room. Word on the street was she used it for private meetings or just to get some peace and quiet. Known for throwing parties that put all of Hollywood's parties to shame, Gloria entertained everyone who was anyone. What most people didn't know was that Gloria was secretly worried sick about money. She'd made an incredible $8 million between 1918 and 1929. That's crazy money back then, but managed to blow nearly all of it trying to keep up appearances with this fancy house. The place also became her hideaway during her hush-hush affair with Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. Yep, JFK's dad. He'd sneak over all the time, pretending to be her financial advisor. And get this, Gloria was way ahead of her time health-wise, turning part of her home into what we'd call a wellness center today. She ate vegetarian when nobody did that, and installed special water filters because she thought Hollywood's water was ruining her skin. When her star started fading in the 30s, keeping up that grand estate got tough. Money troubles forced her to sell, and eventually the whole place got torn down. But movie fans still remember Casa del Sol as the perfect symbol of Gloria's larger-than-life personality. Its disappearance just shows how quickly Hollywood's golden moments can vanish. Cary Grant. Cary Grant's polished on-screen image suggested a life in fancy penthouses and grand estates, yet his actual Beverly Hills hideaway told a different story. Tucked behind tall hedges and modest gates, Grant's home wasn't a massive mansion, but rather a private sanctuary. He valued his privacy and enjoyed adding humorous touches to the decor. Visitors noticed tasteful interiors with playful details that hinted at the wit behind his refined persona. Built in the late 30s, this low-key residence had winding paths and a lush garden where Grant liked hosting close friends. These small gatherings were said to be far more relaxed than the high society events he attended publicly. He preferred having just a few guests over, enjoying quiet conversation, or screening his latest film in a small viewing area. Behind Grant's sophisticated image was Archibald Leach, a working-class boy from Bristol, England, who ran away at 13 to join an acrobatic troupe. His home contained subtle reminders of this humble past, including several small circus keepsakes in a special case. Though known for his elegant style, Grant was surprisingly cheap in private, a habit from his poor childhood. Staff revealed he carefully tracked household expenses and often fixed broken things himself instead of replacing them. Perhaps most surprising was his lifelong insecurity about education. Having quit school at 14, Grant created a hidden study where he spent hours improving his knowledge of literature and history, with many books containing his careful notes in the margins. In stark contrast to his smooth-screen persona, Grant battled deep self-doubt. Journals found after his death revealed his ongoing identity confusion. Once writing, "Everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant." His home included a meditation room where he practiced yoga decades before it became popular in America, finding it helped with his anxiety and depression. Despite this inner struggle, Grant created a warm home environment, especially after becoming a father in his 60s to his only child, Jennifer. His study contained dozens of heavily annotated parenting books, showing his determination to be the attentive father he never had. The walled garden became his special project in later years. He personally tended the roses each morning, telling friends that watching things grow gave him a sense of stability he found comforting. There were even stories about a hidden nook behind the library shelves, offering a quick path to the study, or maybe just a playful nod to Hollywood's love of secrets. Though Grant eventually moved away, the house remained a subject of whispered conversation in local circles, its understated exterior hiding the star power it once sheltered. Even today, fans romanticize this humble hideaway, reminding us that real class often thrives in the simplest settings. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo's New York City apartment on East 52nd Street perfectly expressed her famous desire to be left alone. After retiring from films at just 35, the Swedish-born actress retreated to this surprisingly modest 5-room apartment where she spent the next 5 decades in carefully guarded privacy. While movie fans imagined her living in luxurious palaces, Garbo chose a simple, elegant space that put privacy first. Her apartment mixed Swedish antiques, Oriental rugs, and art by Renoir and Bonnard, reflecting her sophisticated taste and European background. The most clever feature was strategically placed mirrors that let her see visitors approaching before they spotted her, a smart design giving her control in social situations that often made her nervous. Garbo's legendary Manhattan walks became an art form as she developed complex routes to avoid recognition, often wearing disguises that included huge sunglasses and men's clothes. Though surrounded by luxury and fame, she lived surprisingly frugally, darning her own socks and keeping detailed expense records in tiny notebooks. Despite her reclusiveness, she kept a small circle of close friends who'd visit for intimate gatherings. Even as her legend grew, Garbo stayed committed to her private world, telling one rare interviewer, "I never said I want to be alone. I said I want to be let alone. There is a world of difference." Former co-stars who visited noticed her home had almost no movie career memorabilia. Not a single poster, award, or photo of herself on screen. Instead, she filled her shelves with books on philosophy, art, and world history, revealing the intellectual depth behind her famous mysterious gaze. After her 1990 death, her apartment was sold with most possessions intact, giving the world a rare peek into the private sanctuary of one of Hollywood's most mysterious stars. Walt Disney. Walt Disney's Holmby Hills estate, hidden on Carrollwood Drive, showed the same careful attention to detail and whimsy that defined his professional work. Built in 1950, this 3.6-acre property became Disney's sanctuary while he was developing his most ambitious project, Disneyland. The most amazing feature was the fully working 1/8 scale steam railroad Disney built around the property, complete with tunnels, trestles, and a 46-foot-long bridge. Named the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad, this miniature wonder revealed Disney's lifelong love of trains and served as a testing ground for ideas later used at his theme parks. Inside the house, Disney kept a special workshop called the Laugh Factory, where he'd tinker with mechanical toys and miniatures until dawn. Staff remembered him often working all night, perfecting small animatronic figures that would eventually inspire park attractions. Despite his growing empire, Disney found peace in these solitary hours of hands-on creation. The house held a sad contradiction. While Disney created fantasy worlds, bringing joy to millions of children, he and wife Lillian struggled with personal heartbreak, experiencing multiple miscarriages before adopting daughter Sharon. A specially designed children's wing reflected both this loss and his determination to create a magical childhood environment, complete with hidden passages and surprise elements built into the architecture. Though Disney's business reputation was sometimes called ruthless, at home he showed a different side, gardening with his staff and hosting Sunday barbecues where executives and janitors got equal treatment. His daughter recalled that despite his fame, he insisted on real family time within their home, establishing a rule that business talk was banned in certain rooms. After Disney's 1966 death, they eventually sold the property, but train enthusiasts still occasionally visit the site where Walt's railroad once ran, acknowledging how this personal passion project directly influenced the transportation systems now used by millions at Disney parks worldwide. So there you have it. Hollywood's best-kept secrets, right? Pretty wild stuff, huh? If you enjoyed peeking behind these famous doors, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Trust me, we've got plenty more juicy Hollywood stories coming your way. See you next time.